everyone. Welcome into another episode of Facts Not Feelings Friday. And we have the awesome Chris Tragasz, who is he's just an all-around super smart guy, way smarter than me. We always like to bring on people that are smarter and surround ourselves with people that are smarter than me, which in this case, if there's like a thermometer and a measuring stick to say someone that's smarter than me, Chris, you've like completely shot over that. Trying to talk with you sometimes, I just like, okay, just keep nodding your head because I don't know the hell you're talking about, but I'm just going to keep nodding my head because you are that incredibly smart. Chris is a cybersecurity and forensics specialist, and I'm just going to let you jump into this a little bit of what you do, how you got in the industry, and then we're just going to roll with it if that works with you.
Great. No, that sounds great. As I told you before, you just need to meet more people. Really, that's smart. I stand by that.
We'll go with that.
So I started as working in like some software development, software testing out of college. And, I ended up working in IT as part of my earlier career, working in support, help desk support, and worked for a community college. And this was early 2000s or so. And as part of the benefit of working for that college is you got to take courses. They would waive the credit charge to take certain courses. So I was kind of looking at, what might I want to take? What am I interested in? And they had a computer forensics course. I was like, what's that? Because that wasn't a thing. I went to college, had computer science degree, but it was not even like on the horizon. I mean, that back then kind of security was like Norton antivirus, like security firewalls, like that was about it. So forensics was like, what is that all about? So I took that course and I was the only person in it.
Nice.
So I got to know the instructor who did this part-time. I think he was an engineer at Motorola, if I recall. And I really liked it. The book was kind of mediocre, but that was like the only book anybody had written at that point in time. But he's like, hey, Chris, they're going to offer this continuing education course by this guy that I know who runs a business doing this type of work. And like you would get a lot more hands-on stuff and a lot more knowledge taking his course if you'd like to be interested in it. And I said, yeah, I would. So then I signed up for that. And that was interesting because the minimum number of people to run a class, I think, was 6. And there was exactly 6 people. And 3 of those were employees of the college. So there was like a huge outside interest in this. Again, maybe they didn't do a good job advertising it, or people didn't really know about it. Strangely, one of the guys in the class we ended up working at the same company several years later.
No way.
He didn't end up pursuing it, but I did as a career, and he didn't end up pursuing it. But I like ran into him at a consulting company working. I'm like, did you take the class back? Like, yeah, that was me. So that was funny, but a very small class. But you got to learn a lot and talk to the professor or the instructor of that course. So after taking I'm all in on forensics. Like, this is super interesting, super, up my alley. And I was like, okay, so I completed that course, and there were no degrees in this or anything like that. And I'm like, how do I get into this? So ultimately, I interviewed for a consulting company, a relatively small consulting company in Chicago, and I interviewed for the Illinois Attorney General's office, who has a high-tech crimes unit, where they were looking for people for this position. It's kind of like a entry-level type of position. And I interviewed for both at the same time, and I ended up taking the job with the AG's office. And so that's where I really sort of cut my teeth in it. They sent me to training. There wasn't a lot of like formalized training. So this was training that was established by outside organizations made up of people in this field who offer the training. That was really good. And there were some software manufacturers that make forensic software that offer training. So that was kind of it, So I went through that and, like I said, cut my teeth in forensics work in criminal cases, which was still probably the most exciting job I've ever had. I mean, every job at some point plateaus and becomes but I got to go on search warrants. I got to go on a sting one time, which was pretty crazy. Just stuff 90% of people never get to do, right? Unless you're in law enforcement. So that was really cool. But at some point I decided, I wanted to kind of further expand what I was doing in forensics. And I ended up going into consulting, working for the consulting company that I had interviewed for originally.
No way.
At the same time. So the time just kind of worked out well. So then I got a lot of exposure to like the corporate side of forensics, and also what we call electronic discovery or e-discovery, which is tangentially related, but mostly has to do with how you collect information for lawsuits as part of the discovery process. So I'm not going to delve too much into that, but it's along the lines of, okay, how do we collect data out of the system? Which forensics you have to do too, right? So that expertise comes in handy there as well. Like, how do we get the data out? How do we search it? How do we look through and find ultimately what we're looking for? So there's a lot of parallels in that. So I did that as a consultant, which usually comes with, and criminal side too, with expert testimony work, which is quite an experience as well, being up at the stand, having your reputation in large part at stake, being very careful about what you have to say. So people in that who have done that, it's quite an experience. I likened it to like going to a job interview where the person interviewed doesn't want you to get the job. Kind of like the same feeling, like the same anxiety, but confrontational in a way it makes it even more anxiety-ridden process. So that was definitely interesting. I never really liked being an expert witness because I don't like calling myself an expert in anything. You could be very knowledgeable about a particular subject, but there is reality something that somebody knows more than you. And I always had that higher level threshold in mind when talking as an expert about something. But I don't do that too often anymore. I'm sort of glad that I don't, because it was never fun for me.
It's a lot of stress being at you. I mean, I know we all watch Law and Order. We watch, Liar Liar with Jim Carrey, but it's a little different when you're up there and having everything thrown at you. And like you said, I love this expert. So there's always someone that knows more, but that's a lot of stress, Chris.
Incredible amount of stress. Like I never liked doing it. You do it and you stick to, at least from my perspective, is like, state what you know, state what you can support. For me, it wasn't about like proving, the lawyers, whoever you're working for wants to prove their case. So they're using you to that objective, right? But if they're a good lawyer, in my estimation, they won't state something that isn't true to prove the case, right? And so that was always me. It's like, okay, I wrote a report. I was very careful about what I wrote. Like, this is what I found. This is how I found it. This is what it means, not what I think it means or how you can interpret it, but this is what I can say based on that information. So I was always careful. And my writing style, even to this day, is very thoughtful. And I think it's conditioned from that experience. Because the reality is, if you state something, if you're really good, like defense attorney, for instance, and if you're good, you pick apart what somebody has said, and you use that against them, right?
Yes.
Prove them wrong. So be very careful about what you write and what you say in those circumstances.
Well, it's facts and feelings. So you're basing 100% on facts on what you're writing. It's not, oh, I feel this way. I mean, your words, like you said, were used against you, and so you had to be so meticulous in what you were saying.
Right, and it's even part of a legal strategy is to turn your words against you. It's not as if like what you're saying wasn't true, but to turn it in such a way that it makes it sound like you're not being truthful.
Yep.
It's a game, right? And there are people that are very good at being experts, witnesses, going through that experience. And some of the people I work with who are just phenomenal based on experience of navigating that, right? Keeping an eye for knowing, there's strategies that lawyers use, compound questions, right? Okay, how do you respond to that so they don't trap you in something that isn't what you're trying to say? People that are very good and practiced at doing that, and lawyers that are very good at doing that. But I never liked being in that position. So once I was in consulting for quite some time, about 5 years altogether, and then wanted to kind of delve into more of the security space and how forensics applies into security. So I've kind of really getting a swath of forensics in many different environments and industries. So that's when I joined CDK Global, which is obviously a large DMS provider in the automotive space. And I've been with them for a number of years, working in their global security group, providing forensic services for various types of things, investigations and security incidents, but also working with them on data protection practices. So that's going to have been my experience in a nutshell as to how I got in this industry and different aspects of the industry I've been involved in.
So just a little bit less stressful. You're not being having your words twisted as much anymore, which is
Right.
nice. Just a little bit less, a little less stressful. So you've seen a lot of different avenues going from the attorney general's office to now where you are now, and taking it into the auto industry. There's a lot going on right now. There's a lot that's changing, and we'll get into a little bit here with some of the things coming down the pike here with the Gramm-Leach. I think it's Bliley Act. We're just going to call it the GLBA Act because I'm going to slaughter the name here. The biggest thing is all the crap that's going on. We won't dive into it a whole bunch just because that's a whole episode in itself. But from your and all of your things that you do and all the avenues that you take and the things you're seeing on a daily basis in our industry, what are some common things that you're seeing that are just I'll say some areas where I will see our industry just kind of falters a little bit, and some areas of improvement that we just kind of need some help on them.
Yeah, in the FTC safeguards that are part of that act, that's what the new aspect of it is. People are struggling with. I mean, it's a very long
Yeah.
document. There's a
Oh my
lot of
gosh.
stuff packed into there, and for me, based on experience of what I've seen, I mean, trying to comply with that is its own beast.
Yeah.
Right? But just in general, like if you are a small business or medium-sized business, is like what is the business really? What is the biggest risk? And we were talking about that earlier. It's like, is somebody going to, you know, persistently attack your specific network because they want to get after you specifically? Probably not. I
No.
don't think that's the most likely situation that you're faced. Now, does that mean you don't have a firewall and all that? No, you should have some fundamental things, right? But where I've seen in my own career, especially from a dealership perspective, is what is likely is going to be something email related. It's going
Yes.
to be a phishing campaign. And generally, what I've seen is people get into somebody's email account in the business and they hijack a conversation. So they read through everything, and this is a person, most likely than not going through this. There may be some automation associated with, but generally somebody has to like understand, okay, what is this conversation? How do we leverage this conversation to get the other party to do something? Maybe that's wiring money or whatever. It's taking advantage of making it look like they're continuing a legitimate conversation to get the other party to do something. And I've seen it. I mean, I would say that's in large part what I've seen with customers that maybe I've contributed to help resolve or provide some guidance on occasion. So how do you deal with that? Well, it's not really that complicated to deal with. There's some just fundamental maybe things you got to change, but they aren't in themselves expensive or difficult to do. I mean, you could hire some company to help you do them pretty easily, but I don't necessarily think you have to. You have to have somebody that goes about it, tries to make it happen. But let's just talk about what that is. Okay. So if you're using personal email accounts to run your business, you should stop.
Stop immediately. Please stop immediately. Stop.
I mean, it's not like years ago when you had to have an ISP to get an email address and all this stuff. And then people are tied to their accounts. I use accounts I probably shouldn't use anymore. Just a collective, it's like a collection, right? It's like, oh, I got this AOL account from 96.
Got my Hotmail account. I never ever check. Yes.
Right, never check. I've like email accounts where all the emails been deleted, but I've never actually closed the account. We all fall into that, but I'm not operating in my business on those. Those are all personal accounts I've added to my collection over time. Um, but here's the thing: it's like, especially, and I've seen this with lots of different types of businesses. You have the person go in, create a Gmail address, and they use that. Well, that's really their account.
Yep.
That's the problem. It's like you can't. I mean, you could tell them to get rid of it if they leave, but they have no obligation to. You have no ownership of it. So what do? Well, sign up for a Google Workspace. It's not that much, and you get a lot of other benefits from it. You get maybe file storage, calendaring, you get all that stuff baked into products like that. Take some time to look at it. It's really, especially, it's monthly. Sometimes you get a discount for paying yearly. It's not that expensive because cloud storage is cheap. A lot of cloud services are cheap, especially commodity services like email. And then what do you get from it? Well, you get all this other features, but you get the ability to administer the account. You can, if there's a password issue, you can do a mass password reset on the account. You can lock it down. You can delete it when that leaves. They don't get to keep accessing it and using it. And especially if like maybe you're a salesperson, you go to another dealership. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to go through your email and you're going to look up who you did business with and try and maintain those relationships, right? But if you have a Google, a work-related Google account, that whoever owns that Google tenancy can get rid of that account.
And I want to circle back on that real quickly. Very, very clear on that. If you're using personal Gmail, AOL, whatever it may be, as the owner, if it's Brooks GMC or Brooks whatever, if I'm allowing my employees to either use their own personal email or allowing them to forward it to their own personal email, when I leave, when I let my employees leave, they own those customers. I no longer own those customers. So we're allowing our employees at that point to take all the customers they want with them. As an owner, I should say those are Brooks dealerships customers, not the employees. So not only does that at brooke@gmail.com look insanely unprofessional, it is not secure, it's not safe. When the employees leave, they get to take those employees with them. They're not your employees. So there's so many things wrong with this. Looks unprofessional and it's not secure.
I mean, people are going to forward things to their personal account, and you can spend a lot of money and try and monitor that and track that down. And it's not really practical, I think, for most businesses to do that based on the expense and the resources that are required. Just don't make it so easy that they just literally have to do nothing because it's sitting in their personal account to begin with.
Yep.
Simple, relatively inexpensive thing to do. So you've got, so how you're looking at maybe doing things better, securing your email. Step one, get rid of the personal account situation. There's really no reason to keep doing it. You can forward. I mean, we all have these old accounts, right? And I was like, well, what do I do with my old email? Well, okay, yes. You maybe have to keep track, maybe keep that account active for yourself so you can go back to your email. But anything that news coming in, you can forward that email to a different email address. So this cutover should be relatively simple. It's a setting that you got to check a box and put an email address. Usually not that hard. If you Google search it for 5 minutes, you could probably do it yourself very easily. And then everything that's new comes into maybe that new email address that you created for your business. And if other people had them, they get a new Gmail address for whatever the business name is, and they forward the email from the old account. Okay, so it's a little bit of setup, but it's negligible. And now you're more mature in your security posture, and it's going to help your organization in other ways. So what do you do next? Okay, well, what's the problem with people getting to your email? Well, bad passwords or data breaches that even if you had a good password, I mean, if you had a 32-character password, some of mine are super long because I can do it.
Me too.
You put it, the information gets breached from that provider you use that password with, and it gets put up on the internet, and people mine that information and they try and use it for other services. So it doesn't matter how long that password was, it's out there. So what can you do? Well, you should still not use short passwords if you can avoid it, right? don't reuse the passwords. And we're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it too. And I've made a concerted effort not to do that. And there are tools I'll talk about that will help you manage that, because it's a hard thing to keep track of passwords, right? But so what can you do? Okay, so you can encourage people to not reuse passwords. I would say either you got to focus on anything. Complexity and length, yes, they're important, but if you really have to drill something into people, it's like, don't reuse it.
Don't reuse them. Please
That's
don't.
a bigger risk. So you've done that. You've discouraged people from doing that. You've taken responsibility of yourself to not try and do that. What's next? Well, what we call MFA, multi-factor authentication. It's been around for a while. It's not, it's not something scary. It's not something really hard to do. You don't need to hire somebody to do it. A lot of services now are just sort of like forcing you to enable it. We're strongly encouraging you to enable it in some cases, and they should. So what is that? Well, it's having some other way of verifying your identity besides the login credentials that you put into the system. And there's I'd say three popular ways of enabling that functionality. It's you get prompted with code on your cell phone. So when you set up MFA, you put in your cell phone number. It goes through a verification process where it sends you a message. You click on the message because okay, that is you. Now in the future, when you log into your email, it's going to prompt you for an MFA code, and you get the text message sent to you. A lot of people are already doing this, for things that they have to, and so that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is to get a phone call to your cell phone where you have to verify yourself during that phone call. It's usually an automated phone call. I'm not the biggest fan of that. I think there's a lot of ways that could be problematic and also inconvenient. Far less to me, it's far less inconvenient to just get text message than to get like a phone call and answer a phone call, interrupt your day even more. And then the third primary way is via an authentication app. And there's a lot of them. Microsoft has one, LastPass has one, Google has one, everybody has one. I did one with Xfinity the other day, actually. They have one. They're great. They should have had one years ago.
Yeah. Yes.
That's another thing. And what happens there is like, okay, you go through the authentication process, which usually is like you scan a QR code on the screen. The app picks that up, puts it in a list, and then there's a number that changes, that rotates out over 60 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever it is. And then so when you log in, you pull up the authenticator app, you input that code, and it's a one-time passcode. We're not going to go into all that, but that's the verification method. So that is the best way to do it. I think a text message, there's some people that would really say don't do it. My personal opinion is that I don't agree with that. If you go the extra step of using the authenticator app, good, do it. It's really not that big of a deal.
It's super quick and easy. I mean, with the authenticator app, I also want to mention that like when I pull mine up right now, there's like 6 different ones in there. So depending on where I'm logging in, if it's HubSpot or if it's Google or if it's wherever, all 6 of them or however many show up right there, and it keeps changing. So you can have multiple sites in all in one spot. So you can have all different things. The other thing is if you change phones. So I know we all went over this multiple episodes ago where my phone took a nice little nosedive into my car door. I switched phones. You can move all that over into a new phone. So this is very, very simple, straightforward, easy to do. Very, very simple.
Install the app and sign in or whatever and re-verify, and you get all that stuff back.
Yeah.
The only thing I was thinking about earlier today actually was like, because I added another one in this morning for something else. I was like, the list is getting kind of long. It's taking me a little bit more time to find that particular app. So what happens when everything requires that? Somebody's going to have to improve that experience.
Yeah.
So I think, text message, at least like you almost instantaneously get it. So you know what it's for, when it comes in right away. So that might be a little bit more convenient sometimes if you have a lot of things in this list to look at. But, everybody recommends you get some kind of authentication app.
And I
over
believe
everything.
with the GLBA Act that you have to have MFA
Right.
as part of it. So not only are we saying, hey, this is something you should be doing and you need to be doing from a security standpoint, in order to be compliant, you've got to have MFA go with your emails and everything in between.
Yeah, and that's going to be a hard thing now. Is like, well, MFA for what? Because it's not like one thing is going to be the going to allow you to access everything unless you have a very simple ecosystem. And I know
Yeah.
that's one of the things my company's working on is how do we uh, bake that into our products and provide that as a service to our customers so they comply with those aspects of it. Right? But it's not an easy thing to solve across a number of different systems, even your own stuff, right? It's like if say your computer, well, do you have some kind of MFA type thing with your computer when you log in? Probably not.
Mm-mm.
Maybe you do with your phone, but then okay, this bank account has it, this system doesn't have it. It's like how do you control all of it? It's not
Yeah.
a trivial challenge to control all of it. But at least with email, with going back to like what's a practical thing, it is, I would say, very easy to do, even for somebody that maybe doesn't know about it. It doesn't take much to get up and running with that, and we'll see more services probably making it even easier to do that over time. But that's definitely highly recommend you do that at a minimum. Both of those things: get off personal email and enable at least some MFA. It doesn't necessarily have to be the app. Sometimes there's complications with that. It's like, well, what if I don't have a phone? Well, in some cases that I think most people do, but in some cases maybe somebody doesn't. It's a little bit more of a challenge there. It's like if my grandmother who never had a cell phone, uh, how does she sign into those systems? How does she get into those systems? She doesn't have a phone. Well, then it might have to be the phone call option where it calls her landline or something, which isn't as great. So there are some circumstances where there are still problems because a lot of it is reliant on you having a phone.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I think for most people, that's not going to be an issue.
Well, there's certain there's a very large company out there, one of the biggest out there in our out there. We'll leave it at that. That right now, well, it's been for God, we're going on. I want to say 6 to 7 months, where I'd had a caller reach out to me. She was, "Hey, are you having the same issue where you do the MFA and it should be sending you a prompt to say click here, sign in, and it doesn't work?" And I kept saying, "Hey, this doesn't work for me. I always you have to say then text me the code." And so about 3 months ago, she reached out and she goes, "Hey, I'm having the same issue. Every time I say send me the thing, I click on it, it doesn't work." I go, "I told you mine's from this the moment that this switched over to was back when like iOS 14 rollout and everything changed and blah blah from a marketing standpoint." I go, "It's never worked. I've never been able to get to work." And so there are certain sites out there that it should be sending you over the way that you set it up and it doesn't work. So you almost need to have that second backup. Okay, do you have the other thing in place? So like with Google, i have I have like multiple different ways set up for the MFA, because things are going to happen, and just be prepared. So when that my plan A doesn't work, do I have plan B and C, and then my other backup plan of Z? Does that just things are we're in a world where you really do need to have these things, and things are hacked daily. Like I use LastPass because I do have crazy passwords, and if a site is hacked, I'm automatically notified to say, "Hey, this site is hacked. Go change your password here." Oh, I don't think I'm using we're using passwords, but 10 years ago I reused a password. So Brooke, you reuse this password, go change it. Just so you are trying to stay as secure as possible for times that things get hacked, and it's going to happen. Things are securities breaches happen all the time, so just be
And
careful.
the password managers.
Yes.
That's a very important one to bring up, right? It's like how do you manage all that stuff?
Mm.
There are people that have an Excel spreadsheet and have all their passwords in it, and certain
Yes.
members of my family where that's the case. And it's like absent a better alternative, you end up
Yes.
writing post-it notes everywhere. What are you going to do? Well, they have password managers and they have cloud-based password managers now. They used to have just one installed on your desktop, and yeah, I use one too, and it's wonderful. Like
Mm.
what I was using for free because they had a free service for a long time, and I ended up paying for it because I'm like, you know what, I'm willing to pay for this service. It's been such a convenience for me because, like, for instance, you can create a ridiculous password,
Hmm.
especially for like 32 characters or whatever,
Yeah.
depending on the system. Sometimes the system limits you as to how long they can be, but you don't have to remember it.
No.
It stores it for you. You you authenticate to it when you need the password. A lot of times it hooks into your web browser. You can just fill in that website with that account information. You can store credit card information to make it a lot easier just to fill in like your credit card when you're buying something.
Hmm.
It's all contained within the app. So a lot of times what I'll do is I won't store my credit card in services anymore. Like, some we give
Oh
you the
yeah.
option to store a credit card in like maybe a restaurant, like a DoorDash or whatever. You can store that. I don't do it anymore. I don't need to. It's all contained in my app with my passwords. That's where I designate this information to live. I trust the platform. I trust the security measures they have put in place. I mean, you got to trust somebody with
Hmm.
that, right? Could they be hacked? Yes, there's been attacks about this. Been some problems with the provider I use, but not anything that's led to anything of consequence um, that I am aware of. I mean, they will be targeted because of the information that they have, but I'm less worried about them than I am the one random service provider that probably doesn't have such great security that gets hacked, and there goes that account information. Like you pointed out, they keep offering additional features to it. Like, okay, looking back in time, we're going to look for data breaches where that particular credential information was exposed.
Hmm.
That's valuable.
Hmm.
You can find that information yourself to an extent, but you'd have to spend a lot of time probably to like figure that out and to look through that information, and they're doing it for you. That's kind of like, to me, the credit monitoring stuff
Yeah.
that you see, right? Like, yes, you can check your credit report for free, twice a year, I think. Any other amount of time you got to pay for it, so you could do that stuff yourself, or you can sign up for a service that includes that's constantly doing it for you.
Yeah.
So and alert you to let you know if there's a problem. And that's what kind of that data breach function feature does for those password managers, is it keeps track of that for you and lets you know, hey, don't use this password anymore. Like, maybe you got a notice from a letter. I mean, I got a folder full of like letters I've got,
Yes.
instances where my information has been compromised. I'm beginning to think there's like any value in a lot of this information anymore anyway.
Yeah.
Um, but not have to keep track of that necessarily. Have that consolidated in the same place where your passwords are. So it's a natural fit in my mind to have that information in one place. And they have, you can sign that up as an individual person, when they have business services that allows you to help manage that as well. So maybe, like, in theory, you had a particular type of password that your employees use to access a system. You could get rid of that account access via that password management service. So if I were an employer, I would definitely look at that of any size business to see if that
Hmm.
might add value to add an extra layer of security to your business, and also provide a convenient feature to your employees, especially. Sometimes you can sign up for work, I think, and then your people that work for you get access to it personally as well. It's definitely worth looking into if you haven't. And I'm not sure a lot of businesses have. Um,
I've
and
never been worked with one that did. Let's put it that way.
yeah, I mean, it's great. Not that complicated either. I think
No.
they're very reasonably designed so that it's accessible to most people to kind of figure out the gist of how to use it.
Well, yeah, and on the password topic, and this is kind of veering off a little bit, but whatever business you have, and I know we're talking auto industry, please put a password on your Wi-Fi just to protect your business from all sorts of things. I don't care if it's your name and a number after it. Just put a password on your business Wi-Fi. We can go on and on for this, but that is just something, a very small tidbit of just protecting yourself a little bit, to a small thing to protect your business. It's amazing what that will do, and just to ward off a few different things. But from personal experience, I had worked with a group, and within a 3 month span, their one store got hit from ransomware, and that it was all based on they didn't have a password on their Wi-Fi. And obviously, we all are familiar with ransomware and how much that costs. And they got hit. Their sister store got hit 2 months later. Why? Because they did not have a password on their Wi-Fi. So both stores got hit within a 3 month span. And we're talking not like thousands of dollars, we're talking of hundreds of thousands of dollars it cost them. So just please put a password on your Wi-Fi. That's all I'm going to say. And you can probably speak more to this too, of like just little things. And for whatever it seems, the dealerships, I don't know why our automotive industry continues to be, we are just these lawyers and no knock to lawyers. I have friends that are lawyers and obviously work with AG office. Our industry is just like this bullseye on our back of like, how can we go and attack the auto industry? It is nuts. We saw when accessibility came out, and if dealerships didn't have the little accessibility icon and it was accessible, that we got hit so hardcore on this. And then going back, like I said, with ransomware, yes, the other industries get hit. Yes, they did. But we saw, I mean, like I said, this was within 2 months, and they were not the only dealerships I saw got hit. So just little things we can do. And as I going back to, I know we talked this a little bit, but this GLB Act, I can also see this getting hit as well. Like there are just little things that turn into this bigger issue because our industry, I don't know why, I really don't, but we continue to have a bullseye in the back of us that just says, all right, vultures, come in, let's just come in and attack auto industry. And I know you can speak more on this because you see it all the time from what you've done and what you continue to do.
And I think that probably has to do because dealerships are aggressive marketers. Like they're going after deals. Like it's a volume business in large part. I mean, that's changing maybe a little bit now with the supply issues, right? But in large part, it's been a volume business. It's always the next sale. How do we get the next sale? And so they'll take advantage of whatever advertising uh, opportunities that are available, right? I think, how many times have I gotten emails from dealerships, or if I get on a text list, I get a text message from dealerships. They call a dealership, like they're on you, like one way or another. They're trying to keep that touch point open, and as frustrating it is, I get it, but it goes back to, it's like I don't get that same type of really persistent uh, sales activity from other things that I sign up for, right? The car dealerships have always been attuned to that. So when you talk about like what we're seeing with potential with the FTC and litigation that might be associated with that, from my experience, I've seen stuff that even sort of precursor to that. So one of the things that I worked on when I was in consulting was a fax blasting matter. So that is where somebody gets sued because of unsolicited faxes, and this is because of the TCPA laws, law that applies to that, much like what's governing other things. So what is this? So somebody, and this is not just car dealerships, this is other just small businesses, right? Trying to take advantage of an opportunity, signs up for a service that sends faxes, doesn't realize that they're violating TCPA by sending an unsolicited fax to somebody. Most people, we used to get a lot of these on the printer, that would come into an office, right? So we've all kind of experienced it. Well, we could throw it in the recycling bin, whatever. You don't pay much attention to it. And it's usually not excessive. It's not like you're getting like thousands of pieces of paper coming in your printer from one person a day. But what's happened is that is a cottage industry by certain law firms. They will try and gather plaintiffs to pursue these cases, whether the plaintiff really cares or not. I mean, but what happens is they pursue them, and they're hard to defend. And so what happens is your insurance company oftentimes is on the hook for that, based on your policy. They'll settle, and they'll settle, and they'll settle, and they'll settle because it is a hard case to defend, and they're hoping that they go away, and the law firms are just more encouraged to keep doing these. So I know, having been on the other side, so I was was retained by a lawyer to help defend a business against one of these lawsuits, and I had to really delve into the fax technology and things like that to understand what was happening, because it was so hard to defend. Even people in my field who had tried to do that didn't have the expertise to really do a substantial job in helping defend those cases. And ultimately put a lot of time and effort to it myself. And I thought we had a good position, and the insurance company kind of 11th hour decided to sell.
Of course.
The lawyer I worked with was really disappointed because we thought we had a good case. But yeah, so you're going to be a target of that if you take advantage of that technology, the faxing technology and advertising mechanisms that do that. What's interesting about that specifically was that the firm had obtained a fax blasting platform from a company in Romania. So this Romanian company was offering this service to people, and small companies were, and the company was represented was a small company, like a mom and pop type shop, and had somehow signed up for that service, probably not knowing what they're really getting themselves into. Well, the law firm obtained the computers from the company and had somebody who was an engineer who knew that system sort of dissect it for customers. So they got a list of potential customers, right? People that they found had faxes sent to them, and they went to those customers and said, "Hey, we have an opportunity for you. We're going to sue whatever that company was if you sign on to this
No
plaintiff's suit."
way.
And that's in large part their business model. And this is true of other things in the legal industry. Other industries, commercials for lawyers you see on TV with telephone numbers. It's not too much different from that situation a lot of the time. But like the web accessibility thing is another area where law firms are exploiting the law to go after people on the likely chance that they're going to settle, because it is a difficult thing to defend, who just put up a website.
Yeah.
Like, I just have a website for my business. I wasn't aware of all this stuff that I needed to comply with from an accessibility standpoint. I wasn't doing it intentionally, not trying to exclude people. And then they get hit by this loss, and they're like, "What did I do wrong?" And that may very well happen with the FTC. And there's so much stuff packed in the FTC. Now, a lot of it is. I'm not saying like it is a bad thing overall, but it is going to be a complicated thing for people to navigate. And you're probably going to have to bring in help to navigate it, because there's not necessarily a clear answer to how you have to do everything. But what I have seen, I've read through a couple times, what's a long document, is a little bit more prescriptive, which is nice, because usually these regulations don't really give you the details of what you need to satisfy it. So in some cases they are being more prescriptive, which is a double-edged sword, because sometimes it's like, well, what you're telling me to do might not be something I actually can do based on my systems. So, and that's a fine line for the government often to walk when they come up with these things. It's like there's circumstances where what they're telling you need to do, you can't actually do, where you actually have to do something else. And they can't contemplate all those possibilities either, in fairness. But at least with what I've seen, they've tried to, like I said, be a little bit more prescriptive to give them people something concrete to hang their hat on. It's like, okay, if I do X, I should be in compliance with this paragraph. But one of the things that I have seen that maybe I'll pick on just a little bit is data retention. So this is something that's sort of near and dear to me based on my own experience, because the amount of information that I have to deal with for either a lawsuit or investigation or anything in my field, data retention is kind of like whatever, right? Like nobody really thinks about it. Maybe you have a policy that you wrote, but are you even complying with that policy? Probably not. When's the last time you've updated that policy? It's probably been never. But
Maybe.
that's now a component of the safeguards, is sort of expiring your information over time, setting up a policy to do that actually you implement. And I think the problem with that is, like when the cloud came on the scene, the cloud storage is cheap. Like you can keep emails forever, and it's probably not going to cost you anything or any more than if you didn't. So what is why even care about that? Well, now you have to start caring about it. And even the company that I work with, we're focusing on that as well. Is okay, how long do we actually need to keep information? There's some stuff that is value in keeping for long periods of time for different purposes, but realistically, it's like, okay, let's talk about this practically and put in measures to actually get rid of information when it's of no value or in whatever time frame we've established. So that's something to consider. And like if you're going into like, go back to like the email thing, like if you sign up for a legitimate like business email account with like a Gmail or whatever, you have mechanisms where you can set some of that stuff in there too.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you really need that email from 2002? Probably not.
Right. Some policy says delete everything that's older than X, you know, or whatever. A lot of times it's not really that hard to do, to implement in something like email. Other platforms more complicated because maybe they don't have ability. They're in a database. They don't really have a mechanism to purge records with any granularity. It can be complicated, but at least start thinking about what maybe some of the simple things you can do with email and maybe how you manage your electronic files on your systems or whatever, stuff like that. Start thinking about it.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. Before we hit record, you were telling me that you were recently looking at vehicles and in the market for a vehicle and telling me about an experience you had. And I want you to kind of talk about that because I thought it was very interesting, the conversation we were having.
So depending on your perspective, picked a bad time to look at it.
It's okay. I just bought one too, so I'm in the same boat. It's okay.
Right. So, I mean, I had a 17-year-old Jetta, which is older than my daughter.
It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. And, finally decided, hey, she's starting to drive. She's in driver's ed right now. She's starting to drive. So I was thinking, okay, things have started to fall off my car.
Probably need to look at getting another one.
I feel like Uncle Buck sometimes driving my kids around. And it's like, okay, it's probably time for me to look, even though from a buyer standpoint, not a good time to buy a car, in my opinion.
Rough time.
But I was like, okay, start thinking about it. So I went to a number of dealerships. So I was like, okay, there's some new cars I'm interested in. There's also some EVs, which I'm really interested in. Some that are out, some of them are maybe not coming out yet or kind of delayed by the chip shortage. But I was like, let me see the landscape of stuff out there. And, I went to, like I said, a couple dealerships and it was problematic because they don't have them.
Yeah.
So I quickly understood where things are at now. It's like, okay, we're making the most expensive version of the most popular vehicle. That's what we're putting all our effort into. And that's what the dealership is going to have. Maybe if
you're lucky.
If you're lucky, right? Like going to a Honda dealership, no CRVs. Like it's the most popular car that you sell, right? Like you got none.
Nada.
With the Subaru dealer, no Crosstrek. No Crosstrek I can even test drive.
But here's a picture of it. Good luck.
Right. We'll put you on a list. Like, and I bought my last car that my wife drives like in 2016. So I mean, it hasn't been that long since I've been car shopping, but definitely a different experience.
A little bit.
To go somewhere like, no, you can't even drive it. I think there was a CRV in the Honda dealership I went to. They had like a 2-year-old CRV that I could drive. Like, well, it's more or less the same thing. Like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. The price is a little different too.
Yeah, price is a little different too. And I'm probably not the best. I'm not the ideal dealership customer probably, because when I car shop for years, and I mean, I'd spend 3 years thinking about what my next car is going to be. So I'm all over, really focusing on. Like I walk into a dealership, I hand you a photocopy of my driver's license and my insurance card. I give you a copy of it. Then I go to the next dealership. I have a folder. Like I hand it. Okay, let's make this as quick as possible. Here's what you need. Let me test drive the car.
I'm ready. Let's go.
I appreciate, like, everyone to appreciate that I did that, right? It's like, okay, he's not just killing lunchtime, time on his lunch break or whatever. He's
not
put some
tired.
effort into this.
Yeah, he's ready to go. He's ready to go.
He's ready to go. What I don't like is I like driving the car myself. I don't like having other people in the car. And I know there's insurance reasons. Some dealerships will do it, some won't. My preference is to not. That's just my personal preference. I understand that. But if you can do it, because like shoppers like me who know kind of what we already want, it gives us some opportunity. Like I give an example. So I went to a Kia dealership And I'm like, look, I want to drive this car myself. They're like, fine, you go ahead. Like, I'd like to take this on the highway because test driving in the local area is one thing, but on the highway, you get a different experience. You're like, no, go ahead. Like, just don't drive. Like, be back in like half an hour or something. Okay, that's perfectly reasonable. Some dealerships, absolutely not. Like, it was, you had to be in the car. You could go around the block of the dealership one time, and that was it. And I didn't love that experience. Like I definitely favored, even if maybe I didn't like the car so much, I definitely favored the dealership that gave me the flexibility to do that.
Oh, for sure.
More so just in terms of who I would maybe do business
Yeah.
with. So I had the experience of driving those cars, and I'm not the type of person that buys the most expensive model, tricked out model of anything. That's just not me. A lot of people are like that. I know what I want, and I know what I'm willing to pay more for. So I don't buy necessarily the basic model of anything, but I'm very particular about what I'm willing to pay money for. That's extra. So I kind of did that, but I was also looking at EVs, and there's not a lot of EVs even to buy, like in general speaking, like varieties of EVs. But what I was really interested in is the Hyundai's Ioniq 5 vehicle, and I actually was on their list to at least to get the opportunity to kind of look at it when it becomes available. But what the car itself, I really liked a lot of aspects of the car. But what kind of hooked me on that is their possibility of offering a program where you can try the car
Yeah.
for up to 3 months. I think is what they stated. I don't know if they rolled that out yet. I'm still kind of waiting to hear back on that myself. But why wouldn't you? I mean, why wouldn't you take advantage of that if you're interested in buying a car? I mean, that's a huge selling point. And I thought about it, like, why don't more car companies or dealerships do that? EVs, they're doing it because it's a big change. There's charging technology you have to have at home. People aren't, it drives differently. There's definitely different things about it. They're a little bit more expensive than maybe an equivalent, ICE car. I understand why they're doing it, but I understand why it hasn't been done before. I mean, I know there's subscription services, but this is like legitimately a trial, like a very, very short-term lease up to like 3 months, I think is the idea. And you get to try the car to see if that is right for you, if that electronic experience of that car is right for you. So I'm definitely open to that. I mean, I think that's a huge selling point. Even if I would probably do that. I mean, I would do that with any car, not just an electric car. Let me actually experience what it's like to drive it over a period of time and the nuances of it. And I'll probably be much happier with it too. Like, I would think it's like sometimes you buy a car and you like how it looks and you've driven around the dealership. Okay, it drives fine as far as you can tell. Then you get on the highway and it's like, oh, it's kind of loud, or it's really bumpy, or it sucks in the winter, or whatever the case is. There's usually something that maybe not as exciting about the car. If you give me a little bit of time with it and I'm legitimately happy with it, I might even presumably maybe pay more for it.
When you bring up a very good point. So I think it was, and you were talking about this a little bit, but I think 3 years ago ish, and Volvo started and they were broadcasting advertising. It was a subscription program. And then there was another company that did it, and then you never really heard more about it again. And so it was at least 3 years ago, if not 4 years ago, I was talking to multiple dealerships and just saying, hey, if you're not going to have an enterprise rental car or some type of rental car adjacent to you, why not do a subscription based program for your loyal customers? And I'm not saying to do it for any Joe Schmo off the street, but your loyal customers. So when the new model comes out, they can get a taste of it. Exactly what you're saying, because you get something like that. And there are multiple ways from a security standpoint. If you're worried, well, I don't want it going, being in Chicago, I don't want the car going to Michigan. Well, you can put, Verizon, I know does this, but there are other companies out there. You can put like a tracking device in the car and say, well, it can't go outside this radius here. So there's so many ways that you can do this, whether it's from an OEM standpoint or, hey, I'm just going to do it at our dealership, because exactly what you're saying, this is coming from someone that you don't work all the time in the car industry, that this is from a consumer. The consumer wants to try this. And as the EVs involved, and the Ioniq just got massive praise that it beat out a bunch of other EVs of how great the vehicle is, they want to try this. So dealerships out there, marketers out there, GMs out there, owners out there. Consumers want this. So talk to me. I mean, let us know if you're doing something out there like this already. Let us know. Let me know. Because coming from Chris, he would love to do this. And my understanding is Honda's still rolling this out. And if you hear back that or you don't hear from someone, Chris, definitely, like I said, let me know.
Right.
We'll get some people talking to you
That's
about
what
it.
I think like the Chicago Auto Show. Like I would be surprised if you surveyed everybody that goes to the Chicago Auto Show if they would sign up for that. I think like 99% of people probably would. Oh yeah, I would definitely do that because those are
Yeah.
people that are especially interested in cars and buying something, buying something new. So I would look at that. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a subscription, but just an opportunity. I mean, for me, like even buying, so I have a van that I bought. That was the prior car that I bought. Like I was like, okay, well, I did my test drive. I'd really like more time with it. I'm like, okay, some dealers will rent out
Mhm.
cars. Like, can I rent this thing to kind of
Yeah.
really try it out? And they didn't have any, so I kind of like struck out on that. I'm like, okay, well, can I rent this car from Enterprise and
Yeah.
try this out? So I was looking for opportunities to really really know if that car was right for me. Because a lot of the times, at least what I ended up doing is like, okay, I figured out, eventually got to a point where I'm like, yes, this is the car I want. And I go to the dealership or whatever and I say, I know what I want. This is what it is. You have it. Okay, great. Let's make this as seamless of a simple process as we can because
Mhm.
I know what I want. Just give it to me. And
Yeah.
and for I think a lot of customers, it's who do that kind of research. It's a big expense.
Mhm.
Um, if you can help them get to a point where they feel very comfortable with that decision, that's gonna lead to a long-term relationship.
Yeah, it's the second biggest purchase. So having the mobility options out there to say, hey, this is what it's going to be like, or you were on 2 year ago, the 3 year ago model, and your car's in for service. Why don't you take this for extended instead of it's extended test drive, if you will, but take it a couple extra days, and then if they like it, well, this is a really hot demand car, but for an extra fee, here's what we can do for you because you're a loyal customer. Or, you come in for 3 years of freaking research. Here's what we can do for your Mr. and Mrs. Customer. And just meeting the customer where they are, because we all think that, oh, the customer's online. Well, no, that's where they're shopping right now.
Yeah.
But meeting the customer exactly where they are. The customer might be online, but now the customer's in the store, and the customer now wants to be in the car, but they're not ready to buy it. So meet the customer where they are. It's the right now the phrase is, oh, the hot buzz term is always digital retailing, digital retailing. Well, it's modern. So where's the customer right now? The customer in your case is, I want to be in the car for a few days. Well, I want to be in it for a week. Okay, great. Let's work something out here. So there's so many ways that we sometimes get blinders on, that where exactly is the customer. And anyways, I just think you bring up a very valid point, and it gets overlooked sometimes because of all the other red shiny objects we have going on in our
Or
space.
the tunnel vision as to what the process is. This is
Hmm.
how we do it. And like I said, and like what Hyundai's supposed to be doing. Yes, it's somewhat long, but even if it was like a week,
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be that long. I could
yeah,
probably get a good sense of whether I like a car in a week's time,
yeah.
um, especially in the winter time, which would be my primary concern. How does this drive in the snow?
Yes,
Is it,
yes.
does it drive well? Okay, that's a huge selling point. That eliminates a lot of the other issues that I might have. That's sufficient condition for me to really take this seriously and buy this car. So and if you come up with that ahead of time, like you don't necessarily want to come up with those arrangements on the spot. Like even if you're willing to do it as a dealership, decide what that's going to be. Say yes, hey, you know what, and advertise it. Hey, you know what? Here's what we
Hmm.
have that dealership down the street. And a lot of dealerships are all along the same path, right?
Hmm.
Here's what we're doing differently that what they're doing. Here's an opportunity you have. And if you want to charge for it, I think that's reasonable too. Like
Yeah.
as long as it's not ridiculous. I mean, maybe that
Hmm.
covers
The
insurance on
insurance.
vehicle or whatever. Um, I I'd pay that. I mean, like I say, it's the second largest purchase the person is probably going to make. If I
Hmm.
could like live in a house for a couple days before I bought it, who wouldn't take
Yes.
it? of that, right?
Especially right now, man. I just saw
Yes.
this funny thing on YouTube of, this guy that, anyways, but yes, it's 100% trying before you buy. I mean, why not? So, um, yeah. Anyways, yeah, I'm going to transition here a little bit. I know that we've been talking here for a bit. We're going to go right straight into the lightning round here. So everyone that comes on the show, got a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
So you ready for this right now?
I'm ready.
Eat your Wheaties. We're good to go. All right. So first and foremost, outside of work, what are some things you like to do? What are some hobbies you like to do?
Well, I like audiobooks. I like podcasts of various kinds. I like learning about different aspects of business. Kind of get large part in listening to things about remote work and how to make that, how that's kind of changing the landscape of things. I've been a big fan of that for a long time personally, just my own life experience with it. But I like philosophy. I like um, I like debates, but not. I like debates that are more conversational, like we're having here. Not like somebody presents a position, somebody presents a conference. I don't find that as interesting. I like when people have different viewpoints and they talk to each other and they can have a dialogue about it. I think you get a lot more from that. Um, so I like that. A lot of, like I said, podcast history. I'm a big fan of history. The history podcast I listen to. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I do experiment with some side technology projects and things that I'm trying to see what I can make, and maybe put out in the world one day. I'm sort of self-taught piano player to
Oh,
some
nice.
extent, but sort of teach myself how to play one song really well.
And still playing piano. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's kind of a variety of hobbies that I have.
Okay. All right. So in your day to day, in your life and work in general, how something that you're continually having to distinguish facts from feelings.
Um, I would think that it is true of security, the security field, where a lot of it is fear, uncertainty of doubt, and doubt FUD, right? It's what do we really need to be concerned about versus what do we feel that we need to be concerned about. And that's a challenge, because you want to like protect everything and do everything you can, but that's not realistic. So you have to like sit and say, okay, what is the actual risk here that we're trying to solve for, and where does that fall in the scope of risks that we have? And it's sometimes, in my estimation, so the risk process can be very subjective. So it's one of the big challenges, I think, is establishing a criteria, mutually agreed upon a criteria to do those types of calculations, to say, okay, this risk A is more significant than risk B. How do we have to try and quantify that, and that's where the facts come in, right? It's not just somebody feeling like something is more risky than something else.
I like it. Yeah, it's there's a lot out there, and if you could quickly get just encapsulated by the fear real quickly, and
Yeah.
it's just going straight into this. Be very meticulous with it. So I love it. We're gonna end on that one. I think that's a good one. So Chris, thank you so much for being a part of this and chatting and just enlightening. I'll say all of us just on the simple, quick hitting items that we can uh, improve on them and be more secure in what we do, and also on your latest adventure in the car industry, because it's always, I think, very beneficial for us all to see it from other people's eyes, because too often we get so like as you said, blinders on. Okay, we always are looking at the website, or we've always see it from our eyes, and getting someone else and saying, hey, no, you know what, this is, I would actually change this, or the experience would be better. So really, really appreciate you being on the show today and being a part of it and letting us your awesome, incredibly brilliant mind. So just thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. And everyone, thank you for being a part of Facts Not Feelings. If you are liking the content and enjoying it, please follow, like, share, and don't miss an episode. Everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, be kind to one another. If you see someone in need, lend a helping hand. And overall, just be a good person. Have a wonderful rest of your day and the rest of your weekend.